My name is Wayne O'Bryant, and I am an Afro-Charlestonian Griot. A griot or jelly is a repository of ancient wisdom and histories. Most griots are born into the profession, and I came about my griotdom honestly. I was born in a historic city and in a historic time and into a remarkable family. My family was 3 generations of educators, born in Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston, South Carolina was founded in 1670 by English colonialists. But at the same time that they colonized Charleston, they also brought in the first group of slaves. So Charleston started off it was the only one of the 13 British colonies that was a slave colony from its inception. South Carolina has a dual nature as a result of that. So the African American history and the English history started at the exact same time and grew up together. As the Afro-Charlestonian, I was born in 1960 in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights Movement happened to coincide with the centennial anniversary of Confederate monuments and events. The Confederacy started in Charleston. The secession was first in Charleston, South Carolina, became the first state to secede from the Union. The Civil War started in Charleston, and so the anniversary of the Civil War and secession coincided with my birth and the Civil Rights Movement. So I was immersed into this dual existence from the beginning. I was born on a block in Charleston that was both segregated and integrated in the 1960s. From my house to the corner of Bow Street was all black, and from my grandparents' house across the street to the corner of Bow Street was all black. But our neighbors were white, and from their house to the next corner of Calhoun was all white. And my grandparents' house from their neighbors to the corner was all white. And so in the 1960s, with all of these dynamics going on, we happened to live in a time, in an area, where we had to have a kind of a race relation on that one block. We had Jewish neighbors on there as well, Muslim neighbors. And so just growing up there was like an incubator of what I was going to do in the future. What I do now is I teach on history, race relations, and religion. And because of my experiences growing up on that block with Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, as well as white, black, Jewish, I learned I had an experience that most people didn't have that grew up in the same time frame. We also had the Charleston Museum was almost literally in our backyard. When we walked out of our grandparents' back door, we could jump over one 3-foot fence and walk across the street, and we were at the museum. And in the museum, we had Egyptian artifacts, Syrian, Sumerian, Greek, Roman. And so we were learning these things prior to even entering school. My informal education began at the age of 3. My great-grandmother was the daughter of emancipated slaves. She graduated from Allen University in 1912, began her teaching career in 1914, and became a principal by 1926. She retired in '62. I was about a year and a half old. My grandfather was also an educator. He started out as a teacher who taught both history and social sciences. And by the 1940s, he was a principal as well. My grandmother was an elementary school teacher, and my mother was the first black instructor at the Citadel. And so I had these 3 generations of educators awaiting my arrival. And at the age of about 2, I can't even remember the memories, but my great-grandmother began teaching me about black history. One of the earliest things they did is they took me to see Martin Luther King Jr. at Emmanuel AME Church. I was still in diapers at the time, and they have to tell me about the experience. But they began to immerse us into what was going on during the Civil Rights Movement. My earliest memories are 1963, when my great-grandmother began the talk walks. We would take walks around the block, and she would teach me about Black history. At the age of 3, I would be 3 years before even entering elementary school. But what she told me is this. She said, "Son, I have to teach you your history, because when you go to school, it will not be there." I was just retired from the system. I was in the school system for almost 50 years, and I know what's in every history book that comes through that system, and our history isn't there. So every night we would leave, walk around the corner to the museum, sit on the bench. She would start to teach. She was the master teacher, and she had one student, and it was me. And so she would take me to different sites around the city and teach me. She would take me to the hanging tree and say things like, well, this is where they hung our people. She would take me down to Anna Calhoun Street, where the slave ships would come in, and say, well, this is where they would bring our people in. And so by the time I reached elementary school and began to study history, I found that what she said was correct, because nothing that she told me was in the books. And so as an adult, I began to research what Big taught me, to find out who was actually right, even though I had always believed her. And so I was able to document and find the proof of the things that she had taught me. And that's what began the work. So I was actually born to be what I am, because true griots are born. And in my family, I was born into the situation with the city, with the block, with the racial makeup of our block, and into a family that began to pour into me the things that I would learn later. And they also began to immerse me into the history. And so this is what started me on the path to where I am now. So that's a little about Wayne O'Bryant, why I do what I do, the nature of the beginning of the work, and why I'm so passionate about it.